Do you like writing with a biro or a fountain pen? Hi and welcome to Knit with Hannah. I'm Hannah. I'm here with Knitting Natter to help you learn to knit the easy way. We are making the slip knot today and we're making it in 3 different ways. This is because I do get some comments on the very basic beginner video that's up on YouTube and I get completely stuck with the slip knot. So it's the very first stitch that you put on the needle, and sometimes this is just that little bit tricky and it doesn't feel quite right in your fingers. So there are more ways of making the slip knot. The way that I make it, I just find the easiest. So we're going to do it in 3 different ways, and I'm sure one of these will get you on track and get you started with your knitting. It's just the first stitch that you put on the needle. I'm going to show you first of all why one thing is important when you're making the slip stitch, the slip knot. So here we go. When you start knitting, you're going to have this thread here hanging out the end, and that is basically the beginning of the yarn, and you start knitting with it. But what you can do is end up with a bit of a loop, and that just hangs there with your knitting. Did you see what I just did there? I tightened it up by pulling on this thread. If you do it in a different way to how I'm about to show you, the ability to tighten that won't be here. It will be in the thread that you've knitted with, so you can't tighten it. That sounds a bit confusing, but I think you'll get the idea as we start making these slip knots. So let's just put that aside, and to begin with we don't need anything other than the yarn. For the third way we will use the needles. For the first 2 ways we will just use the pieces of yarn, okay? So we have the short end and we have the yarn going to the ball. What we're going to do is just line it up here, and this piece, the piece that's going to the yarn, we're going to roll over that. Now made a loop, and now we're going to pull this loop over and pull this piece of yarn through it. Hold on to both ends as you do that, and there you go, you have your first stitch, and that's ready to put on the needle. Let's do that one more time. You've got your yarn sitting here, you have the short end of yarn on this side, and you have your your ball of yarn going there, okay? What you're going to do is move this piece of yarn, the longer bit that goes to the ball, over the shorter piece, and then you move that loop over the short end and you pull the short end through. But you want the loop, you don't want the whole piece going through it, do you? So there you go, you now have your stitch. You can put that on the needle and you can tighten it with that piece there. That's what I've just done, and that's what you saw with the finished piece of knitting, okay? When you start knitting and this stitch at the end of the row starts to loosen, you have this short end that you can just pull on and it will tighten that stitch again. Sometimes the problem is that you make the slip knot in the wrong way and you need to pull on this end to tighten it. You need to pull on the yarn that's carrying on with the knitting to tighten it. But of course that isn't available. You have to have that short end available so that you can tighten that stitch if you need to. Okay, let's make it in another way. This time we're going to just use a bit more jiggery-pokery with your fingers, okay? So we have the short end down here and the long end down there. That's going to the ball. We're going to put your fingers in here. 2 fingers in there, your thumb and your second finger. You're then going to twist them over and you're going to pick up this loop, this short end here, and you're going to pinch that between your 2 fingers. Then take hold of the other piece of yarn and tighten it. Okay, and there you go, you have your slip knot. Let's do that one more time. Sounds a bit confusing, but short end, long end going to the ball of yarn. Your thumb and your forefinger, your index finger go into those pieces there. Twist them round so you've got the palm of your hand now facing you, and then you're going to hold on to the short end with those fingers and pull that short end through till you've now got the loop, and you can put that loop straight on the needle. There you go, ready to knit. And again, if that comes loose, you have the short end ready to tighten that stitch if necessary. Okay, This is the last way, and this is the way that I usually teach. I find this way, this method easier, and I find it actually faster. So this is what I know a few people who got confused with on the main tutorial, but it's easy once you pick it up. Okay, so the short end of yarn is in my right hand, okay? And I'm going to hold my 2 fingers, my second and third finger, ignoring the thumb, okay? I'm going to hold the long yarn that's going to the ball in my palm there. I'm going to hold those 2 fingers up, okay? I'm going to wrap this short end of yarn around the tips of those fingers and then around the knuckles of those fingers. And this is where the needle comes in. It goes underneath the loop that's by the tips of the fingers. It goes over the loop that's by the knuckles. And then that loop that's by the knuckles gets put onto the needle and pulls underneath the piece by the tips, and there you have it, you have your stitch. Let's do that one more time. Over by the tips, over by the knuckles. Push that needle underneath the bit by the tips and pull that piece of yarn that's by the knuckles over and under that needle, and you can pull that through and it becomes a stitch. Just very slowly you can see that becoming a stitch there. That little slip knot is making itself as you pull that piece of yarn through there. Okay, over by the tips, over by the knuckles, and then you move the needle underneath the first loop, over the second loop, and that second loop ends up on the needle as you pull it through there. Okay, and it's automatically already on the needle, ready and waiting for you. So there you go. That's 3 methods of making the slip knot. 3 methods that you can pick and choose which way feels best for you, and pick and choose which way you understand more easily. Sometimes our brains just do things differently. That's just the way it is. We all understand that. We have different preferences and all sorts of things in life. Some people will prefer tea to coffee. Some people will prefer milk chocolate to dark chocolate. Some people will prefer to go for a walk. Others will prefer to go to a bike ride. It's all sorts of things in life, and then it can also be the detailed things too. Do you like writing with a biro or a fountain pen? Just recognise that sometimes you just need to look a bit further and find this kind of video, and you'll find exactly what you need. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you click below, you will find another video, and this is 10 tips for beginner knitters. I really do hope you enjoy that video. There it is. You can click below, you'll go straight to it. Subscribe here. I will see you again soon. Bye for now. Happy knitting.